For most of human history, every second child died before adulthood. There were no vaccines for diseases like tuberculosis, diphtheria, or measles. No antibiotics. Malnutrition, overcrowding, and poor sanitation stacked the odds against survival. But in the last century, step by step, everything changed. X-rays allowed us to see inside the human body without surgery. Leonard Thompson became the first person to receive insulin in the 1920s. Penicillin, the first antibiotic, was discovered later that decade, by accident. Polio, once a feared disease, has now been almost eradicated. The discovery of the structure of DNA laid the foundation for modern genetics. Since the first organ transplants in the 1950s, operations have now become routine. Breakthroughs in immunotherapy have revolutionized the fight against many cancers. MRI has transformed medical diagnoses. In the 80s, scientists identified HIV, the virus that causes AIDS. Over this period, humanitarian organizations have saved millions of lives. And when COVID-19 swept the globe, mRNA vaccines helped bring the pandemic under control. These breakthroughs, all recognized by the Nobel Prize, have brought immense benefit to humankind. Today, 96% of newborns survive to adulthood. Global life expectancy exceeds 70 years and over 80 years in many places. This year's prizes recognize remarkable achievements that promise to revolutionize health in the century ahead. How has humanity come so far? We follow our curiosity. Stay curious.
Good morning, and allow me to add my welcome. My name is Adam Smith, and it's my great pleasure to be back here in Gothenburg and to be your guide to this, our 14th Nobel Week Dialogue. Curiosity is really all you need to bring today as you join our Nobel laureates, experts, and students in exploring this critical question of how we can get a little closer to delivering health for all. As Anna mentioned, and as you'll have seen from your programs, we have a diverse array of topics to get through in a rather short space of time. And thus my role is, as ever, twofold. I'm both your guide and your timekeeper. So we should press straight on with our first panel, in which we will set the scene by exploring the economy of health. For this, we have four wonderful people. We have Jean Tirole from Toulouse, who was awarded the 2014 Prize in Economic Sciences in honor of Alfred Nobel. We have Jean-Anna Röttgen, who is Chief Executive Officer of the Wellcome Trust, Dame Sally Davis, Master of Trinity College, and between 2011 and 2019, Chief Medical Officer for England, and to moderate the discussion, Mariam Clayson, who is a Senior Advisor in Global Public Health at Karolinska Institutet. Please join me in offering them all a warm welcome to the stage.
Good morning and welcome to this first session on the economics of health. We are going to focus on affordable health for all. As you all know, this past century has seen great advances in access to affordable, cost-effective, high-quality health services, in part due to the advances we've seen in medicine and health policy. But there is varied success and inequities across geographies within countries and between countries. And my first question to you, John Arne, is Currently, we also seen rapid declines in financing for health development, unpredictable declines in health financing. And I do know that you see this actually as an opportunity for reform. So could you tell us a little bit about how you view the reform in this area and what are the measures that could make a difference?
Yeah, that may sound a bit cynical. So let me first start to say that we should really celebrate the successes of global health financing over the last 2 to 3 decades. We've heard already in the introductions, we have more than doubled the reduction in child mortality, maternal mortality. We have reduced the incidence of the big infectious diseases, and we have added 10 to 15 years in global life expectancy. And all of this is due to the scaling up of technologies, and in particular where we have had dedicated programs that have vaccinated children, making sure that we can treat people with HIV, TB, malaria, and so forth. The challenge is that with the US abrupt changes in reducing development aid, and then many other countries, including from Europe, including UK, where I live, are reducing official development assistance, it means that we at least will see a 30% reduction in health aid. And that is a crisis. Models have indicated that millions will die every year in the coming years due to this. So yes, we need to treat it as an opportunity. And there has been a rallying cry for change from leaders from, in particular, Africa for several years. They want to be more in charge of their health destiny. They want health sovereignty. They want to make sure that they can set the agenda. And for far too many years, international aid has bypassed the national systems. So we need to use this as an opportunity. We need a more integrated approach to delivering primary health care to people in communities. We need to still make sure that we can utilize technologies. And just to mention 3 examples, Wellcome, together with Gates Foundation, is now investing in a large tuberculosis vaccine trial. We hope to have the results in 2 years from now, and that may be the first TB vaccine on market for more than 100 years. Lenacapavir is a drug that you can inject only twice a year and that can prevent HIV infection in those high-risk groups that are most vulnerable. And we just had results from malaria trials indicating a new drug with a new mechanism of action that can be as good as the best treatments today and do not see resistance, yes, because we see increased resistance for malaria. And all of this needs to happen through actually scaling up and investments. We need more domestic resource mobilization, but we need a more effective global health financing system. And we need to shape up that by consolidation, reducing fragmentation, and making sure that we can support countries.
So, John, how can we ensure affordability of these new innovations? You have guided the globe on how to tackle some of those really wicked, complex problems across sectors, climate change and so on. What can we do for health? What do you see as some of the most critical steps toward affordable health for all?
Well, I would like to say first that, good health care for everyone is part of the common good, and we should all have access to it. The question is how to finance it. That's really the question now. Given that the healthcare costs are going up and up, we need to find the money in order to finance the innovation. So, one thing we could say, okay, let's reduce the price of drugs. That's tempting, except that we have a social contract somehow. It's a rich country which should be paying for the drugs, not the poor countries. And at this stage, it's pretty hard to actually reduce the price of drugs. In a country like France, the price of drugs is 1/4 of what it is in the US. And we are facing a perfect storm because the US wants to possibly use reference pricing, which means that they will compare to European pricing, which will put a lot of pressure on European prices. So that's kind of difficult. And we have to find the money to finance innovation. And there is not one way to do it. There are 6 or 7 ways to do it. One of the things we can do, of course, is to make sure that once the drug is off patent, then there will be generics, there will be bioequivalents, which will be very cheap drugs for everyone. So we have to create more competition for generics or bioequivalent. We have to avoid tactics to delay entry of generics. We have to reduce the healthcare budget, where it's not necessarily like comfort. It's very country specific. So in most countries, I will say you need more prevention, less treatment and more prevention. You need to avoid the comfort treatments. You need to do lots of things like that. But it's very country specific. So you need to have kind of more financial muscle in order to be able to finance healthcare. And we could go on, but the key thing will be innovation, and that was the previous intervention. We need innovation which is going to deliver the new things. And those will raise another challenge, which is the affordability of those new drugs. The old models, I'm a bit nervous about talking about all those experts, those three experts here. But the challenge where you build a blockbuster molecule, the marginal cost of producing it was zero, and the only thing was to get the right bargain with big pharma, and some kind of subscription contract where you'll get access to it at a reasonable price or something like that. But now more and more the marginal cost of the drugs is going up and up with personalized medicine, for example. Because now a drug might be for a few people. So we have to change things, and we could discuss further what we should be doing, but we have to rethink. It's like for AI. For AI, we have to change the regulations. And same thing for drugs. The new technology makes us change the regulations, and we have to be innovative on that front as well, not only on the scientific side.
It's really around innovative financing as well as innovations. Now, Sally, John Arne and Jean had talked about affordable healthcare. Affordable health goes beyond healthcare. And I know once upon a time you talked about affordable grocery basket. So how can people who maybe live from paycheck to paycheck today make healthy choices around food and nutrition, and how can we create an enabling environment to make healthy choices where we actually have access, all of us, to a healthy grocery basket?
So let me start from the fact that most discussions are about health and affordability, therefore cost. And actually, I chaired a commission a couple of years ago, and we demonstrated in Britain, I think it holds true across the world, that investing in health is investing in prosperity. It allows people to get educations, it allows people to work, to care, and to have happiness and be part of society. So I think we need to change our discussion from affordability to what's a worthwhile investment. But that then takes us into the commercial determinants of health, which you're talking about. So what is damaging our health? It's poor diet, lack of access, alcohol, smoking, and pollution as a start. If people are fit, and not over drinking or over smoking, and there isn't bad pollution, they are likely to have good cardiovascular health, heart health. They're likely to have good brain health. But we see this dynamic of a pandemic of obesity spreading. So you're into, what do we do with the industries that make profits out of making us unhealthy? I mean, there are many governments that own tobacco companies. What do we do about that? And how do we help people take the right healthy choices when actually they're living in a tsunami of unhealthy choices? I love sugar. Of course, it's addictive. I quite like the odd ultra-processed meal too, but they're not good for me. And how do we make it affordable? And do we do it by taxation of those companies and their products? Do we do it, as I was suggesting that you picked up, within supermarkets? That doesn't work in low-income countries, where you say you tax the ultra-processed and unhealthy food to subsidize the fruit, the vegetables, the pulses and everything. But we've got to look at behavior. And there are many nudges we can make about healthy transport, walking, biking, many things. But it's a new, growing science that we have not yet embraced enough for health.
Thank you for giving us that broader vision, and I think all three of you has given us some real food for thought in terms of the options and the combination of options that we have to embrace to actually make progress on health for all. I'm thinking about this week when we're celebrating new discoveries, and in particular now in fields that you have referred to in non-communicable diseases. Some of these new discoveries are expensive initially. And John Arne, how can we shorten that time from the launch of an exciting new discovery that can tackle some of the disease burden globally and the ultimate affordable use, access and use of those services? How do we close that gap?
Yeah, because affordability is partly about the purchasing power of our systems, because to be honest, it's not we as individuals, but it's actually our healthcare systems that pay, either through tax-based universal health coverage or social insurance models. But that's a universal agreed approach. So it's the purchasing power in a way, and then it's the price and the cost. So let's focus on the price. And we need innovations in regulation that Sean discussed. But I think we really need to understand how can we speed up the way we do research and development. We can shorten the timeline, in particular on the commercial side of this, I believe. Artificial intelligence will help us in doing more faster drug discovery, but also testing whether drugs potentially have side effects before we do more extensive investments. And all of that can reduce the cost and increase the speed of innovation. Then our clinical trials paradigms will probably also need to change, partly because we really are moving towards more and more individualized and personalized treatments. And it means it's hard to actually get the necessary data from the large scale, old blockbuster sort of model also of clinical development. But that means we still need, of course, solid regulations. We need safe and effective drugs, but we need probably more pragmatic approaches to drug discovery. And then more on the financing side, we need to scale up the opportunity to pay for these technologies. And the big challenge then is who pays for innovation, because many of these drugs and innovations are expensive, but that's because we pay for the innovation and not the commodity in its own right. So how do we balance that more? It's hard, and we know the price differentials between North America, or in particular the US and Europe. How do we square that? How do we square that in a way that still maintains strong incentives for innovation?
So John Arne, do you see a risk with the current tariff deals in actually influencing the policies? Maybe that's a question for you, Sean, but let's hear you are in the midst of translating discovery into markets. Is there a risk that these tariff deals, bilateral, that's ongoing right now, could actually increase the cost of these new discoveries?
Yes, so the big question, so if this is the price in the US market and this is the price in the Europe market, if the solution is to take down the price in the US market, which is the most favored nation approach for Trump in some way, we will take out a lot of money in the system, and that will reduce the capability of actually financing innovation, and we need that. The other approach is, of course, to increase the European price, and I think currently we see more movement in that direction. The recent UK-US deal on both tariffs and production, and also willingness to increase the threshold in the NICE guidance, is indicating a willingness to pay a bit more from Europe. But I think we need the balance, and that balance, it's hard because it's not a fully commercial market. Back to my comment, this is funded by citizens, by our collective health insurance or tax-based systems. So how do we square this? And I think it's a debate and a discussion that we need to do. We know in defense investments, there is big discussions, of course, on the reciprocity between NATO balance between the US and the European countries. We probably need to think about the balance also on paying for innovations in this human rights sort of markets of health, which is different from a completely commercial market.
So Sean, I'm sure you have thoughts about this, but there is another balancing act I'd like to ask you about. How do we balance, on the one hand, smart industrial policies to really stimulate innovations and creativity, while at the same time ensuring affordability of those innovations? And I'm sure you have some thoughts around that.
So what we need to do is to actually change the processes. And you mentioned that. I mean, now it's a different ball game, so we have to test in silico, what's called in silico. So we need to actually have new methods using AI and virtual twins and various things to actually test things. We are no longer at the time of Pasteur. He was taking 25 sheep and inoculated with a vaccine and 25 control sheep, and comparing now, you know, and now it's much bigger, of course, for RCTs, there is randomized control experiments. So we need to improve our processes, but we also need to improve our bargaining power vis-à-vis the US and China, because now US and China are completely dominant in biotech, just like in AI. And it's not that we don't have the scientists. Actually, many of the good publications are done in Europe. And that's a shame, because you see that we have completely lost a war of innovation. And therefore, it's just like in the military domain. The US can impose its condition on us, because they have something to offer and we don't quite have much to offer because of that. Even so, our scientists are wonderful. So there is something wrong, and we have to change, and that's our fault in Europe. We have to change the way innovations comes about. So we need to have new focus more on disruptive innovation. So I wrote a report with a few colleagues almost 2 years ago on, well, we invest in automobile. China and the US invest in biotech and AI. What's going on, right? But that's true, the numbers show that. And we spend our money for innovation in, helping SMEs. There's nothing wrong with that. But, we don't see what will make an innovation environment. So we need to redo that and stop spreading budgets. I mean, think about BARDA. BARDA, when they delivered the COVID vaccine, they chose 6 teams across the world in the 3 technologies. And they said, those are the best. We're going to put all our money on those 6, and that worked. And in Europe, we spread the money, and each gets a little piece of money. It's not the way to do it. I mean, we wrote entire reports. Mario Draghi wrote on that. And still, people don't hear that we have to do something to get innovation going. And then we'll have a bargaining chip.
Right. Thank you. And Sally, you get the last word on this. Access seems to be as critical as the initial innovation discovery. So how can we use, in addition to what's been said, innovative financing to ensure that we reach and that people not only have access, but use the latest and the best technologies and drugs?
So let me start by access in the rich countries. Of the last 14 antibiotics that have been licensed by the FDA, the last 28, only 14 of the rich countries have it. Why do they not have access to those antibiotics? And I think, as we'll discuss later, antibiotics are a global public good because the cost of regulation and acceptance by the regulatory authorities in each of those countries is too expensive. So no surprise then that those antibiotics are not available in most African countries and everything. So we have to sort out, as we've been discussing, regulatory processes and cheapen them. How can we harmonize and share across Europe, across Africa? That will reduce prices. But we also can do things like tiered pricing, we can do pooled procurement. I, as you know, have this interest in antibiotics. And it's not just access, it's the cost and the fact that over 50% of antibiotics in the African subcontinent are falsified or counterfeit. So it's access to quality medicines and quality products that will work. But tip it round. I have a washing machine. I don't know how many programs it's got. By the time you've twiddled everything, at least 30. I use 2 or 3. Ultrasound machines in the rich countries are the same. But actually, how many do we need in the bush in Africa or in a little village in India if you're looking at a pregnant woman? You can do it much cheaper and much easier. And then we should re-import the frugal innovations into the global north.
Thank you. As you hear, many important thoughts here that we hope to pick up during the day and discuss further. Thank you so much for setting the stage for today.